Hey, what's going on, gang? This is Nate on the Stone. Welcome back to my channel, and this week we are talking about the power of language and how whoever controls the language is going to control the world. Gender ideology is one of those fields of knowledge, for lack of a better word, that requires constant watching, because if you blink, you're going to miss something going right by you, which means you'll end up misgendering someone's goldfish, or actually thinking that biological sex is actually rooted in reality, instead of just being something assigned to you at birth, which means that you're probably going to end up hauled before some sort of tribunal of truth or human rights commission. And one of these new developments is that you can be both non-binary and a lesbian at the same time. Now, to be clear, non-binary is a new term for people who say that they identify neither as male or female, but as something other. It's actually an umbrella term that can cover a whole spectrum of the newly discovered genders, such as agender, genderqueer, gender fluid, bigender, or multigender. So a person who was biologically female, but who identified as non-binary, however that person defined non-binary for themselves, would not be a woman today by the new orthodoxy. A lesbian, on the other hand, has always been defined as a woman who liked to do the
devil's tango
with another woman. And I mean practically always. Our word lesbian comes from Lesbos, which is an actual island in the Aegean Sea. And the reason why the name of an island actually came to be used to describe female homosexuality is because of the island's most famous inhabitant, the ancient Greek female poet Sappho, who is best well known today for writing several love poems to other gals. Sappho's, Lesbos, lesbians, bada bing, bada bang. So it seems right off the bat as if these two things, non-binary and lesbian, would not fit together. But apparently now it does. Last August, Pink News interviewed 3 self-identifying non-binary lesbians and asked them what it meant to be a non-bin Liz. H described it like this.
As far as I'm concerned, my understanding of my gender and my understanding of my sexuality are very much intertwined and linked, like they are one and the same. I think it's sort of disingenuous to claim that you can't be both non-binary and a lesbian, because you can definitely have an authentic lesbian experience as a non-binary person. I have had people say that you can't be both non-binary and a lesbian, but I do think that comes from a flawed understanding of what lesbianism as an identity means, both now and historically.
Ash, another of the participants, said this, quote, "It's not a choice to be non-binary or lesbian, but it is a choice to proudly label myself as non-binary and lesbian. As a lesbian, you define probably one of the biggest gender roles that exists, which is for your life to revolve around a man. So that links into how being non-binary also doesn't conform to expectations of gender." Now, to understand what is actually going on here and what's changing, we have to take a refresher course in modern gender ideology. My apologies in advance. Modern gender ideology says that man and woman are too simple and too restrictive to actually reflect reality as it actually is. So instead, the modern person has been broken down into 4 distinct components when it comes to sex and sexuality. And the first of these is actually sex, which is now defined as a person's biological status. That's telling right off the bat, because status isn't something that's actually rooted in anything solid. A status is, quote-unquote, the relative social, professional, or other standing of a person or thing. A status is beholden to outside circumstances. It is not intrinsically a part of you. Which is a very sly way of saying that biological sex isn't actually real. It's just something that is assigned to you at birth, as the jargon says today. Second is orientation, which is a person's preference for who they find romantically, emotionally, and sexually attractive. Third is gender, which is now defined as a socially constructed idea detailing the normal behavior and role of a particular sex. Being a man, for instance, means being courageous, strong, industrious. Being a woman means being well-bred, caring, and understanding. Fourth and finally is gender identity, something which is completely separate from all these other components. It is someone's perspective of their own gender, how they feel their gender is, and how they want to present their gender to the rest of the world. In case any of this is confusing, and it is, several attempts have been made to actually explain to the layman what these different components are and how they actually mesh together. One of the first of these was the genderbread person, but after people complained that his physical form looked too masculine, which meant that He didn't actually relate to any people who didn't identify as masculine. The genderbread person was retired and replaced with the gender unicorn, something that was so bizarrely off the wall that nobody yet would actually identify with him, which meant that he was a safe tool to use to teach grade school children all about the different components of sex and sexuality on your tax dollar behalf. Now here's the key point in all this though. According to the gender ideologues, your orientation and your gender identity are completely separated, as shown by both the genderbread person and the gender unicorn. But as both Ash and H said in their interview with Pink News, lesbianism for them isn't just their orientation, it is also part of their gender identity. How else can we interpret it when they say my sexuality is lesbian, but also my experience of gender is lesbian? As well as linking lesbianism with non-binary gender identity, since both of them destroy traditional gender roles for women. In other words, orientation and gender identity are being linked together in order to create a new reality, the non-binary lesbian. Which just 5 seconds ago by the world clock of history was not kosher according to gender ideologues. Dr. Deanna Adkins, testifying before the North Carolinian legislature, publicly testified that gender identity was the only medically sound way to determine a person's sex. But that means that if someone is non-binary, then they can't be a woman according to their own subjective understanding of their own personal reality. And since a lesbian has to be by definition a woman, then it should be impossible for the two things to be conflated. A non-binary lesbian should be a contradiction in terms. Gee, Nate, it almost sounds like they're changing the rules in the middle of the game. Ding, 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 ding.
You just won the solid gold Cupid doll.
Now, we could just say that this is another example of the gender ideologues, a part of the left, being hypocritical in order to get a new result that they decided that they wanted, having a laugh at it, deriding it, and then going on to something more important, like watching mold grow on cheese. But there is something more important going on here besides the magical creation of the non-binary lesbian, and that is the absolute domination of language. Language is inherently powerful. It is not an exaggeration to say that language is one of, if not the most powerful tool that a person can have. Now the question is, what exactly is this power and how does language have this power? I mean, language is just made up of words, right? And how powerful are words? They're just basically vibrations on sound waves. Well, we already know how powerful words can be. All of us have personal experience with that phenomena. Your significant other saying, "I love you," can make you feel on top of the world. You feel like you can go out and just conquer whole continents after you hear that. That same person saying, "I hate you," a difference of only one word, a difference of only 4 letters, can make your entire life crumble and crash around you. Words are quarks. They're bundles of energy that can either create or they can destroy. And the reason why language has this power is because of its very nature. The philosopher Martin Heidegger said that language was the house of being. Being here being just the big philosophical term for reality, what exists, both physically, like dogs and trees and oceans and people, as well as transcendent things like goodness and piety and justice. Language is the house of being because these real things, in a very real sense, live in and exist in the words that convey them. Now, how does that work? Heidegger says that what makes an action an actual action is bringing something to the fullness of its essence. In other words, bringing something to its full potential. We humans, he says, are brought to our full potential by thinking, which actually makes sense when you remember that the definition of man, the essence of man, is a rational animal. And Heidegger says it is in thinking that being is actually brought into language, that real things are actually conveyed between people when we actually utilize language. For example, I could describe a body of salty water extending so far out that you cannot see the land on the other side, so vast that the sun is swallowed by it every night, and whose ripples are so big that it can actually attack your legs. Even if you have never seen the ocean before, you can get a mental image in your head of what it kind of looks like, however rough, from the description that I just gave. And you can get that mental image because of the words I used. And you can do that because the words I used you actually understand. And you understand the words I used because the words have meaning. And they have meaning, and this is the crucial part. They have meaning because they actually convey and reflect real things that actually exist in the world. Or to take another example, I could describe something that you would never in a million years see in real life. A polka dot horse tap dancing on the back of an elephant as he's walking through the desert. That's, granted, a ridiculous example, but you're thinking about it right now, aren't you? You have a picture in your head. And you have that picture in your head because the words I used to paint that picture are attached to real things. And this is a power that everyone can tap into because language is something that we all share. By conveying real things in our speech, we can describe, argue, persuade, imagine, envision, inspire, even make people laugh. But, and this is the crucial part here, gang, we can only do that if the words we are using are actually connected to being, if they're actually connected to reality. Edgar Allan Poe actually put it perfectly when he said, quote, "Words have no power to impress the mind without the exquisite horror of their reality." And this is why the changing of language, as with the non-binary lesbians, is so dangerous, so serious, and tyrannical. When you say that language is no longer connected to reality, but instead words and language are instead reformed for your own private ends and purposes, language is still powerful, but it is now powerful only for a small cabal of people. A cabal of people who have the right to change the language however they want. And they have the right to change that language because of their own enlightenment and their own virtue. Whereas before everyone had access to the power of language, now only a very thin sliver of people have that power. Furthermore, since the meaning of words can change on a dime, however the elite want them to change, their power is actually increased because now they're not just tapping into reality, they're actually and actively reshaping and reforming reality to fit what they want it to be. How can you argue with someone when the two of you are using two completely separate vocabularies? How can you point out flaws in logic or history or law when the words that you're using don't have the same definitions anymore? Even more pressing for today, how can you convince someone, or society in general, that you are not a racist, sexist, bigoted, transphobe, homophobe, when the meaning and the definitions of those words have been changed? The simple answer is, you can't. You can either cut the Gordonian knot, or you can decide to say the heck with it and play by the new rules in order to try to grab some of the power for yourself. All the non-binary lesbians in the US could probably fit in a good-sized school bus. That's not the problem. The problem is our language is being remolded and reshaped in order to accommodate their new subjective reality. And the fact that our society is fine with this and is actually applauding this shows that our fight to retake our culture actually extends much, much farther than just winning an election, whether that's 2020, 2024, or beyond. It depends in large part on making language great again. But what say you? Is language a key component in actually bringing some sanity back into our culture? And if so, how do we actually go about reforming and retaking the language? As always, let me know your thoughts, your ideas, your opinions down in the comment section below. Well, that about wraps up everything for right now, gang. As always, if you liked the video, whether you agreed with me or not, don't forget to show your support by giving it a like and sharing it on social media with all your friends. And if you like videos like this, don't forget to subscribe and to ring that bell for notifications so that you will always know when I post new videos like this every Tuesday. Videos you're not going to want to miss. As always, thank you for watching, for giving me a little bit of your time. Thank you for everyone who has already subscribed to my channel. I appreciate you all. And I will see you all again here next week, gang, on Top of the Stone. Ciao.